framework for identifying and then changing.
And for the clinicians who are tuning in, as Joanne mentioned, we just came from a clinician training, and so one of the things that we ask the clinicians is to ask themselves what animal models can they relate to as therapists. Do they try to kind of put the client in the pouch, or are they more kind of directive with this is what you need to do without kind of paying attention to the emotion processes as often? And so it's something that everybody involved in the treatment program, in the treatment model, can use in order to kind of keep moving towards recovery.
All right, so we're going to talk for a few minutes about what made it about these two models. Why did we gravitate towards each other, Janet Treasure and the new Maudsley group, and us? And so we're just going to run through these so that, again, we can come back to more clinical focus. All right, both models, separately, we're already really having a family focus, almost puts it too mildly. So I'm just going to help go through the slide. We have this power, both models have a powerful belief in the healing power of families, that families and parents are a part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem, right? And that parents can play a very active role in supporting recovery efforts, right? Using both emotional coaching and the motivational interviewing that the new Maudsley was using more explicitly.
And I don't think we talked about the emotion coaching yet, and so we'll just say very, very briefly that it's our 5-step model of helping parents to attend to, or carers rather, attend to their loved ones' emotions when those emotions start coming up, either throughout the leaf feeding process, or if there's a risk of relapse later on, or just in the day-to-day kind of grind of recovery.
Right. The other aspect to family focus that we shared, and so we started seeing this, and it doesn't mean lots of other models aren't doing this as well, it's just all this constellation together of really emphasizing is the belief in the right to treatment. So sometimes an individual may say, I don't want my family involved, but both our models felt that that was irrelevant to the family getting treatment. They don't have to be involved in the daughter's treatment, or the son, of course, if it's a male, but that they are invited and welcome to engage in treatment for themselves, whether, one, their child is in treatment or not, and whether their child agrees to their involvement. So again, we would never breach confidentiality, but we would say, this is a family affair, families are involved, and families suffer the results of eating disorders.
In fact, in the UK, they have legislation that permits families to have treatment in their own right if they are involved in a significant caregiving role, even when their children are adults. And so that's just really, really amazing. It's an amazing model to kind of aspire to and to feel inspired by.
Similarly, both models were very skills-based, right? So both emphasize skills training for parents. So this is not us saying, again, that parents don't have skills, right? But most of us, I don't know about all you guys out there, but most of us did not have emotion coaches for parents. So it's not, and most people didn't plan in their little parenting thinking that they were going to have to face such a daunting and life-threatening illness that was all kind of behaviorally driven. So let's face it, I don't know who has the skills naturally to do either one of those things, but we certainly don't. So that's the same. What Janet Treasure would talk about, and we found so compelling, was she would talk about pretty drastic things that parents did, and she would say, that's not a mean person, that's not a bad parent, that is a desperate parent without skills. And we both were doing the same thing. We can teach it, we can teach it, this is completely learnable. So what we would call therapy interfering behaviors, of which there may be many, are viewed as manifestations of a lack of skill or a lack of confidence in skills. So let's say there's a rhino who's coming in and giving the whole treatment team heck and just saying, you know, you got to do this and you got to do that. We would, and we'll talk more about what we see underlying those behaviors, but we certainly see them as, you know, we can work with this and get skills so that they can replace those therapy interfering behaviors. And in emotion-focused family therapy, that emphasizes meal support, emotion coaching, and relationship repair, those 3 parts that we talked about in the overview, while the new Maudsley model emphasizes the meal support and the motivational interviewing, which we're going to talk about next. Okay? And so both models were motivation-based. Again, those of you who aren't familiar, as Adele said, motivational interviewing is an approach It's an approach to therapy, but it's also a philosophical approach that can be incorporated into all therapies. And many, many people who work in eating disorders are very well trained in motivational interviewing. So in the new Maudsley model, we just want to emphasize again, that's how much they believe in parents. They teach them the techniques of MI, right, as if they were therapists. And parents are provided with opportunities to practice, to role play, to go home and try it, right, and see how it goes. And in emotion-focused therapy, we were incorporating the motivation piece much more in a way that's embedded within the steps of emotion coaching. One of the things about motivational interviewing is you avoid argumentation and you see the behaviors as motivated, not as unmotivated. So I'm sure lots of people who say, my loved one is not motivated to recover, right, because she's doing this and this. We'd say, there's no such thing as an unmotivated individual. It's just that what they're motivated to do might trump their motivation to get better. So I might really want to get better, but I might be so terrified of emotional pain that I feel and I don't know how to handle that I keep. Similarly, a parent who might not be seeming they're doing the things that would help their person recover, we say it's not that they're not motivated to be part of the treatment and help recovery, but something else. And they might be motivated by terror that if they do something, their loved one will get worse. And of course, we can just speak it. Their ultimate fear might be that she's going to commit suicide if they push her too hard, or that she'll get worse, right? And so they get so terrified. So we've always embedded that in, that this is all motivated. And so we instead attend to whatever is going on. And as Adele said before, the steps of emotion coaching come in. We just attend to that. We label that fear, let's say, in the parent. We validated, no wonder, this is terrifying. You know, it does have a high death rate. And then we look at how emotional needs can get met so that parents can engage in a different style that doesn't maintain the eating disorder, and so that the individual doesn't need her eating disorder in order to get those needs met. And finally, both had an emotion focus, right? Emotions and emotion avoidance in the sufferer have always, everywhere you read now, you'll see that those are considered to be factors related to the development and maintenance of an eating disorder. If I'm avoidant with emotion, if emotions overwhelm me, if I feel like they have me instead of me having them, then an eating disorder, we often refer to it as kind of a good girl's heroin, in the sense that it does bring down the system, it does calm and medicate the pain, right? But also the really exciting part about this for us is that emotions in the family, and in particular, the style of emotion processing. And every family has a style. And really, if there weren't an eating disorder, it probably wouldn't be a problem. Are you kind of more formal and a little bit emotion avoidant? Is it all chaotic and everyone's kind of, some people say we show our love by shouting. You know, really, it's not a judgment, but emotion processing style in the family can maintain the illness. I'll just give you a little of example how. What if we're kind of a really, like, stirred up emotion family, like lots of emotions being expressed, and you have born into that family something that we call a super feeler. And we really found that many, many individuals who develop eating disorders, it's like they just don't have quite the same leather skin. And all that expressed emotion just goes in and rattles around inside them, and they take it on. And so the family didn't do anything wrong. They're loving, they're noisy, they're emoting, but they didn't realize that around that person, maybe they could have adopted some other strategies to help the person feel not so overwhelmed, right? So although there are many factors related to the eating disorder, and we know that, there's genetics, there's all these different things, right? The thing we love is we say to you, okay, what can you change? Can you change your genetics? Right? Can you change how tall you were when you were 12? Because sometimes that's a risk factor. Can you change that your family had to move because, mom or dad got a really important job and that was really good for the family overall? All those things that contribute are hard to change. But you know what? Really, we say it's not easy, but it is simple and very teachable, very learnable to alter emotion processing styles in an individual and in a family.
Okay. So here we'll move into how the two models have worked together to integrate parts of the other. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the contributions of the new Maudsley model to emotion-focused family therapy. So for example, Janet Treasure and her group are just so well known for their beautiful and elegant research looking at the neurological underpinnings of eating disorders, when the illness is active, but also following recovery. And so we have been inspired by that research to develop the terms super feeler, and then Janet has suggested to us that we also include the term super sensor, because as Joanne mentioned, and one of the genetic pieces or one of the brain-based pieces is that yes, there are these young women and men who are born and have a higher, more in tune radar to emotion in their world. They are able to sense conflict, for example, whereas other people do not pick it up. And so we have totally brought that research in, and to help parents, to help carers, also to help loved ones understand what might be motivating the eating disorder. We've also included the animal models. In fact, we now find them indispensable. I'll have to admit, the first time I read about the animal models, I thought they were a little cheesy, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know if I could ever do this with a straight face. But now, I find them so powerful and so useful, and like Joanne said, fun in an otherwise pretty daunting arena. And then, of course, motivational interviewing as an extra tool for parents. So those are the major contributions of the new Maudsley model to EFFT, so how we've integrated their work. In terms of the contribution of EFFT to the new Maudsley model, what they've done is that they've taken on the teaching of parents to become their child's emotion coaches as an add-on to motivational interviewing. So just the opposite of what we've done. They've also integrated the work around relationship repair, which we will discuss a little later, as well as the various methods to help process the emotional blocks in parents. So for example, when Joanne was discussing, perhaps fear creating a paralysis response in a family. Now, if a parent or a caregiver is afraid that by pushing their child to eat, that child might commit suicide, they're going to feel paralyzed. But they also need support in order to work through that experience so they can continue to be helpful to their loved ones. So that's another piece that they've adopted in their program.
And actually, maybe you want to add, Adele, we didn't put in here the part about taking the animal models and seeing the underlying emotion.
Oh, yeah.
That's been...
Yeah, so maybe if we have time, maybe we can go back to that slide and show a little bit of what that looks like.
Okay.
Okay, so looking forward, what we're doing with New Maudsley is we continue to meet on a monthly basis. And we do that very early in the morning because of the time difference. But we're pretty systematic about it so that we can continue to collaborate and we can continue to discuss how we can improve our delivery of our own models, improve the integration of the other components of the model, and within those conversations we're brainstorming and we're trying to be creative and find new ways to be able to increase recovery rates for everyone. And Janet Treasure has this really beautiful quote, and I'm not going to say it exactly right, but it's something like, if what you're doing is already working, you keep doing it. And so if the treatment that you're receiving or the treatment that you're delivering is working, then great, it's fantastic. But if it's not reaching everyone, if the standards aren't producing the desired results, then we will advocate for a collaborative approach, an integrated approach, and a creative approach so that we can find opportunities for solutions for those families. And did you want to say a little bit about ARC?
Yeah, and I also wanted to add to what you were saying that, yeah, we want to remind you, because we're thinking a lot of people are going to have clinical questions. That's why we're going, we went quite fast through the slides so that we can come back to some of the questions we've got, and we'll go back and look at that whole process of how you do this integrated model. But I want to remind you the reason that these things are important is because as we said, everybody in the field is looking to improve, and we found that you could, this kind of collaboration, because it's been crazy hard in some ways, because because people have reactions to things, but we thought if there's this much similar, but we're each doing things somewhat differently, surely we will be better together. And that's really been the motivation. It's been very, very exciting. And one of the big things we have loved about what they do is ECHO, as Adele said, expert care is helping others. That's our dream. Our dream, like we joke with the clinicians that we train, we're trying to do you out of a job. Like we're actually saying, and we, again, the neuroscience is so helpful for showing that people think about your children have been tuned in. Their neurobiology has been tuned into yours ever since they were in utero, right? Like, it's really, really hooked to each other. So if we can get a parent with that kind of strong connection, no matter what the difficulties have been. Sometimes clinicians will say to us, what about the family who has had so much struggles? You know, there's this, there's that, there's problems, there's mental health problems. We're always saying, still, that parent is still better suited to the job because the child, even if they're 47, are more tuned in to their parent's brain than they are to any therapist, right? So that's our passion, you guys. And so our kind of answer to ECHO has been ARC. Now, ARC is nothing but one little tiny line, thanks to Adele, on a web page that says ARC exists. It doesn't really, it is purely, it's not even in its infancy, it's in utero. It's a twinkle in our eye, and it stands for the Association for Recovery Coaching. And we founded it with the two of us, with another community and therapist worker, and some moms who underwent our trainings and who in fact are also therapists themselves and are running our emotion focused.
Who've had daughters recover.
Who've had daughters recover and who are running emotion focused family therapy parent groups, which we do. And, well, which we have a number of people doing. Adele's going to tell you about that. So we founded this with the goal of, you know, if we could eventually get enough people trained and if we can fund it, that imagine if we had, especially if it could be virtual because of all the remote sites in Canada, where we could have people being able to be tuned in from all over and getting parents go through the program, be trained to train other parents to support other parents. We just think the notion of reaching beyond the current number of expert centers, of specialized centers, is a kind of dream of ours. But we have not gone it any further than just founding it and saying it exists, but it doesn't do anything yet. So we don't want you to think that you can run and join ARC and
Coming soon. All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about research. In fact, one of the questions, I'll just read it, are ideas on how to structure EFFT into a group for families. And so we're running groups for families right now for research purposes, and so is the Maudsley. We're doing very parallel versions of it. We just completed data collection for a multi-site pilot study. So we had 7 sites across Canada, from BC to Newfoundland and everywhere in between, and different clinicians who had at least 4 days of training in emotion-focused family therapy delivered a 2-day workshop based on the integrated model of EFFT and the new Maudsley for carers of sufferers. And now this workshop, depending on the center where it was located, where it was delivered, was open to people in treatment or on a wait list, which we feel really, really strongly about given the length of wait lists in Ontario, but also in Canada. I was open to carers of children, adolescents, adults, including couples. So it was open to like the spouse, for example, of an affected individual. And it was open to people who are already involved in treatment or people who, for different reasons, were not actively involved in their loved one's treatment. Okay? And so we have about 150 participants in total, and we've just completed the analyses. In fact, we've submitted a manuscript for publication, so we hope to be able to share that with you very soon. But in a nutshell, what we found was that following the 2-day workshop, there were significant changes in the carer's feelings of readiness and confidence regarding on those tasks of recovery coaching. So for example, meal support, interruption of symptoms. There was also a shift in the positive direction regarding carers' attitudes in terms of their role as their child's emotion coach. And this was even seen in the adult population. So that means that parents were saying, yes, I absolutely do see my role helping my child, even my adult child, manage emotions in a more health-based manner. And our favorite result, there was a reduction in parent fears associated with their involvement in their child's treatment, including their feeling of being to blame. Because as we all know now, parents are not to blame for eating disorders. In fact, they are the best resource for recovery. And so in a nutshell, those are the results of this multi-site. And so the question around EFFT into a group for families is that it is happening. It's happening across sites. We're at the preliminary research phase now, but as soon as we're able to publish results, then we'll be in a position to be able to hopefully offer it in a more widespread fashion. Anything to add around that piece?
No, I think we can go to some of the other questions if we want.
Okay, so let's go back to
that slide of the overview.
Oh, whoops, I skipped it.
Overview of EFFT. There we go. That's hilarious, isn't it, that we finish each other's sentences? So just, you know. All right, so we had some questions already, and we're going to not like take them so specifically because, of course, then we want to help the maximum number of people sort of get some more ideas about this. So let's just look again. So what we're saying, guys, is that parents can become the recovery coach, right, by being taught the skills like a new nurse on the unit. They can become the emotion coach, which, as Adele said, and we've repeated a couple of times, is a very specific sequence, right, that we teach them to attend to an emotion, to label it, to validate it, and to meet the need. And there's a whole story behind that that we probably can't do in the context of this webinar, but it's because emotions are lovely things that because we feel them in the body, then other people can see them in the body, and you can be trained to see, I think you look sad, I think you look angry, and then to...
But it's not a skill that comes naturally. We joke, and I say that I didn't actually learn how to process emotion until after my PhD, which is kind of a joke because I'm a psychologist. I probably shouldn't say that on a live recording.
Yeah,
but just to say that it's not something that comes naturally, and so the idea that someone is just going to instinctively be able to know how to respond to their child's pain or their child's struggles is a bit absurd, especially in the emotion avoidant culture that we have all kind of grown up in. So I really like that part.
All right, so let's start. I'm going to make and we can vote, obviously we both, but we'll make some general comments about the theme of a bunch of the questions, and then some are more specific that we think might be interesting to the whole group, and so we'll try to answer them specifically. But first of all, there are questions like things like the individual is not at home, we're very alienated from them, even if we're engaging EFFT, but we're struggling with a certain point, and how to convince someone. Now, it might sound funny to put all those together, but we actually want to treat those a little bit together. The thing with this, well, let's say it again. If one could get one's mind around the idea that if I don't know how to handle emotions, I mean, anybody who's a parent, and clinicians are parents as well, or anyone who's ever been in the grocery store, even if they don't have kids, excuse me, has seen a 2 to 3 year old on the floor in the grocery store. Okay, do you know what I mean? And hang on. What we always say is it's as though, you know, and sometimes people say, oh my gosh, my kid is like a 2-year-old and they're only 11 months. Another one say they're 4 and they're still doing like it. But that tantrum phase that everyone seems to go through, it is as though the kid was cruising along and anger, rage, frustration, everything just comes and lands on them all at once and just flails their body onto the floor. Do you know what we mean? Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to handle it. And so we actually utilize a group who help parents deal with small children's emotions. We utilize a lot of their work because we always say, what is the child saying when they're flailing around on the floor and hitting and all doing all the things they do in a tantrum? They're kind of saying, I don't know what to do with this feeling that I'm feeling, and I don't understand what it means. So when I hit you, bite, scream, scratch, you know, whatever, what I'm really asking for is help to understand this and help me return to what I was doing with a new way, because, wow, this is like a tsunami, and I have no idea what's going on. So now, this is not to patronize an adult or anybody, an adolescent with an eating disorder, and say you're being a 2-year-old. This is to say, gosh, again, most of us didn't have emotion coaches for parents, and most of us didn't learn it. So what if we could teach parents to help bring down the storm, the brainstorm? We call it like a windstorm in the brain. If you try to talk logic, Or you try to hang out clothes in a windstorm, what happens to the clothes? They do not stay on the line, they fly away. So instead, how do you bring that down? And generally, when you normalize it for someone, when you say, I see that you're angry, no wonder you wanted, if it's true, it's a silly thing, right? Maybe you wanted the extra ice cream and you didn't get it or whatever. I can see you, and should we do this? Or I can see you're sad. You really liked that puppy and you couldn't take him home. Do you want a hug? Right? We actually teach. That sounds so simple, right? But it's actually a little process. Look, see if you can just attend to the fact that there's a feeling. You label it, and if they say it's not anger, it's this, great. That's still, it's okay if you're wrong. Then you validate it, no wonder you feel sad, no wonder, and then you find the need. And again, the short version is this, because the long version is every emotion has a specific need. It's really not that much to learn. The reason I said all those questions can be related to this is because you're trying to convince someone. We don't try to convince anyone. We say to them, no wonder you don't want to be in treatment. I wouldn't want to go there either. It's robbing you of this thing that you've really come to depend on. Or that, you have to take time off the job that you love so much, whatever. Or if someone's not living there, no problem. On the phone every day, texting. We've had moms doing emotion coaching from abroad, literally in continental Europe, with their daughter here and us coaching on the phone and them coaching by text. Can you believe it? So it's not, and then if someone is refusing, again, what would you think is going on for them? And how do you validate that? Yeah, maybe the last times it really didn't go well, and you're no wonder you're just digging in and saying, or maybe you're terrified we're going to take something that has really come to be such a, I don't know, like there's so many. So do you see how all those questions, we kind of have the same answer, which is in EFFT, we learn emotion coaching, right, and recovery coaching, and when parents get stuck, going, I can't do it anymore, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm resentful, we process and we help them deal with that, then we actually can keep moving forward.
In fact, I'm looking at one of the questions that's just come through, and I'll just read it and address it. It's actually a very similar answer. While most parents that I've worked with are desperate to be involved in their child's recovery, occasionally I've met parents have the fix my child mentality. How do you motivate those parents to really take on these recovery roles and tasks? And I love how that phrase was worded, because one of our mottos in EFFT is that there is no such thing as an unmotivated parent who doesn't get it. It's that the parent or the carer is more motivated to avoid something that they believe is worse from happening. So for example, if we really think about what would motivate a parent to say, please fix my child, it's your job. What would motivate a parent to try to convince you, the therapist, to be the one responsible for fixing? In our experience, the motivation usually is fear. Fear that they don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, fear that they're going to mess it up because they may already feel to blame for the presence of the eating disorder, period. And so what we do is we work through those fears, those emotional blocks from the parent, so that they can come to a place where they're not feeling shackled by those fears and not feeling desperate to, hand over their child to you to fix, so that they don't, mess it up even more. It's a very, very painful place to be for a parent, where to feel hopeless or helpless or without skills. And we don't want any of the carers with whom we work to feel that way, because it's not good for them and it's not good for the family. So we'll really, really try to work hard to find out what is motivating them. In this case, what's motivating them is the fear of that they might do something worse. It's a really strong motivation. Right? The last thing you want to do as a parent is to make something worse. And so if you really, really believe that, you're going to find all kinds of ways not to be involved in the treatment. So that becomes the target in order to support the parent, the carer, to move past that block and start to engage in those tasks of recovery, those tasks of emotion coaching in a different way.
So, I don't think we need to bring up the slide, because in general, then what you hear is when we think of those animal models, we think we've added that to the new Maudsley model is when someone's, of course, they think the same, but we just made it more explicit. So what might motivate someone to be a rhino? Again, stereotypically, a dad might more typically be that, because a dad might feel incredible shame at feeling deep down like he did something to break a child. So that rhino hides all that, right? The same with the ostrich, fearing being shamed, having broken their child or not being able to fix them, right? And so on. So,
or being overwhelmed themselves about emotion, so feeling like they're going to break down or burn out. We certainly had parents say that to us as well. I'm afraid of being involved because I'm struggling myself, keeping away from a depressive episode or anxiety. And if I'm not well, then it's going to be even worse. So we always try to work to find out what's underneath.
And so you've just seen now that this model becomes multi-level. So what are we saying to the clinician who wrote that question and the other ones? So someone sent us a quote once from somewhere that I never know where. Until the parents' cries are heard, they cannot hear the cries of their child. It's lovely, right? So what we're saying is if you attend in the same way, attend, label, validate, and meet the emotional need of the parent who's saying, be involved, then they can actually open up that space. Another one that's very classic is clinicians will always say, and again, with great respect to families, but just lost themselves, what about the parent who has an eating disorder themselves? Or what about the one that's very resentful? And we would say again, what's underneath that resentment? So if we just go in there and attend, of course you're resentful. This has been a long haul. You're exhausted, right? So we just attend to it. It's amazing because when clinicians say, I have a family who can't do it, we will say, no kidding, show us that family. We haven't seen them yet. It may take all different forms and shapes, and it may require different things, but we're saying that under all circumstances, there is a role for families that can be huge.
And if not, we as the clinicians take the blame that we haven't found the right way to reach that family. And so there's no such thing as firing a family or firing a client from treatment for not this or that or the other. We really say, how did we miss the boat for this family? Because by doing that, we can actually find new solutions within ourselves to be able to help those families to move forward. So I'm seeing another question come up. Would you change the amount of emotion/control of the carer based on the age of the child? For example, under 10 years. And so I guess there are two different components in terms of an answer. On the one hand, your language will need to be appropriate for the age of the child. So if you're engaging a 12-year-old, your language in the emotional realm is going to be very different than if you were engaging a 35-year-old or a 47-year-old or a 55-year-old individual. So that's the one piece. The second piece is, in terms of the amount of emotion or control, well, we ask ourselves, what does that individual need? If they need a lot of emotional support, then we will advocate for that, whatever level of emotional support is required. And the amazing thing about emotional support, like the giving of emotional support, is that once the person has received a critical amount of emotional support, they end up being able to internalize that support, and they end up being able to turn on the autopilot and use it for themselves. And so there's no such thing as a never-ending loop of emotional support. Eventually the skills will be internalized and the person will be able to do it for themselves, and they won't need those symptoms to cope because they'll have everything they need inside to cope with stress, to cope with emotional pain, etc.
Which is every parent's wish, right? Is that they give their child what they need to launch out in the world. And it's funny that age difference. Like we can quote a mom who went through the process and whose daughter was really deathly ill, and who we never met because we just kept teaching the mom, and the daughter is completely recovered. And she said, so even though, again, we never treat the adult as an infant or as a toddler, it's not patronizing like that, but she said, in regard to food, it's like feed the baby, right? You would never just not feed the baby, right? So if your child is still your child, even if they're 40, you're not just going to sit and right, so you want, and then in regard to the emotion support, she'd say, it's like rock the baby. So again, when the baby is really distressed, you might be, oh my God, so exhausted if you've got a colicky baby and you are just, but you don't just put the kid down and say, look, I did my 2 hours of rocking you and I'm done. You would just rock the baby. So we really like that because her child was a young adult when she went through it, but that helped her frame And, you know, it reminded her that that was her true parent heart.
And it gave her permission
Yes.
as well to silence the people in her world who were telling her that if she did this, she would create a needy, dependent child who would never be able to do it for themselves.
Yes.
And that is one of the greatest myths of our time in terms of emotion parenting.
Yeah.
And so that's a fear when you hear people around you saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that? You sure you want to be involved? You know, it might not be her recovery. It might not be longer lasting." And we just know now, you know, in terms of the neuroscience, in terms of the research, that it is a myth.
We had one case where the daughter, you know, late 20s, moved home for a while, and mom said, "But shouldn't I see this as regression?" And I said, see it as a chance to get it right this time, like to launch her for good. And sure enough, she's completely launched and living with her boyfriend in another city. Listen, we have a couple of other things, and I just want to address one briefly because it's so compelling to us. Someone who's using the EFFT approach, right? And now they're doing really well with it, but really struggling with the weight gain. I wish we could hear back from you right now and have your voices on, because we could say, all right, now that you've heard us talk, what do you think is the answer to that? Is it that, oh my God, I better backtrack because she can't handle the weight? Or is it attend to that feeling that's associated with that and help label it and validate it? Oh my gosh, it's like a grieving to let go of the overly thin body. It really is a grief. Instead of, oh, well, this is healthy. We always say to resist cheerful reframes, explaining, but you know, this is healthier. Yes, oh my gosh, and all those clothes that you loved so much at that weight and so on.
And all the comments that you got in terms of how good you looked in this world of ours that is weight obsessed and thin obsessed.
And so right as Adele came in there, do you see the little twist, the opportunity? Because what we would say is when you get to that last one, attend, label, validate, meet the need, what we're really, we're really saying is what need got met by having an eating disorder? What need got met by being praised for a thin body? I mean, is praise a bad thing? I never am going to praise you. That would be pathological. It feels good to be praised. So, and the praise is a very simple one. What kinds of needs do you think you might go on a curiosity journey about what's getting met? And then you could say, you know what? What I think is when you had that thin body, there was a confidence that you never had when you were little. I don't know. It could be so many things. And so then what it opens, and people will often say when they get that far, she'll go, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to go back to, I don't know, randomly, something that fills that need that somehow thinness took over. Mm-hmm. So we really love that because you're using it, but then, now what? Keep doing, we always quote a mom who says, attend, label, validate, meet the need, repeat. She said, that's my mantra.
So now okay, there's another question here.
Oh, we're trying to do them all.
I think we'll have time for both. Do you believe that blocks are always emotional? What about autistic features, personality disorders, or other comorbid disorders? Can the blocks made by these be cleared using EFFT? And so I'll talk a little bit about, especially the personality disorders and the comorbid disorders. The DSM could be categorized into perhaps two different sets, and this comes from the researchers at the DSM themselves. They are looking at disorders that are motivated by emotion difficulties, emotion processing difficulties, emotion avoidance. And so there are so many disorders like anxiety, like depression, and even personality disorders.
And addictions.
Including addictions, which of course have genetic components, of course have many other components. But the one component that underlies all of these disorders is difficulties with emotion processing. And so we believe that once the person is, refed and their symptoms are not ruling their life and their brain, that we can help them with emotion processing, which means that we can certainly clear up those comorbidities, including personality disorders. And that's what our experiences have been clinically. So it's very, very hopeful and a very widespread kind of effect.
Because again, think about it. Let's say you have a different view on that. Let's say, your personality disorders or personality disorders. That's still the only parents you're ever going to have, and that's still going to be your child. So we're saying, well, what the heck, let's just, jump in and see this. And we've seen such drastic improvement, in fact, where people really don't fit the diagnoses of their access to personality disorder anymore. Mm-hmm. And we have just this comment about just saying a little bit more about the ideal animals. And I want to just make sure. So the idea of that, I guess, is what are you going for in terms of your style of involvement or directing the loved one and your style of providing emotional support, right? And so I'm just going to repeat and see if that does it. So the idea is the dolphin is a very consistent provider of direction if it is guiding someone to swim somewhere, right? But it doesn't charge forward and grab you and pull you so that you break your neck, you know, and it doesn't like hang back and say, I don't know, you kind of tell me what you need and I'll do it, right? So we say the dolphin is nudging you and guiding you and swimming alongside. We're in this together, but I want you to take a bit of the lead. Okay, I want to nudge you this way, right? So that's very much it. I think we're in it together is really the message about both. The other one, the example that Adele often uses is, I can think of my 13-year-old son and his dog. I can tell you if he got lost in a dark cave, there would be two totally different experiences if he had his loving dog and his beloved dog with him, or if not. So that's really the St. Bernard. If you think of the image of St. Bernard from even commercials or wherever we see them, they're in the snow. They're an image of warmth that's there by your side. You can snuggle up with them, do you see the notion that they're there, but they're not, again, overwhelming you? The notion of the kangaroo, you always tell that example of the mom who said, oh my gosh, I'm a jellyfish with a pouch, right? The notion of the kangaroo is, oh my gosh, again, I'm so scared that you're not going to be well, I'll just keep you in my pouch. And the individual's like, thanks, it's comfy, but gosh, as I'm 24, it's getting a little tight in here and it's hard to breathe, right? So it's not badly motivated, but it's not such a great place to learn how to find my way home on my own.
And I'll just add to that, when you have two parents, and again, stereotypically, moms tend to be jellyfishes with pouches, so kangaroos. Dads tend to be more rhinos. And what we see is that if mom is a kangaroo, for example, dad might become even more of a rhino because he feels that mom is being too soft in her approach. And so he'll try to overcompensate by being more tough so that the child doesn't become a softie. Mom will see that, start to go, oh God, dad's being too tough. I'm going to be softer to compensate for that. And so it's such a freeing thing for parents to be able to say, oh my God, that cycle is happening between us, and we really want to regroup so that we can create a different environment in the home to further support recovery. It's a really, really beautiful thing to watch with parents, especially in the context of the two-day workshops. I'm looking at the time, and I think we're out of time.
Is there any other pressing question? I can't see with my old eyes, but
let's do one more question that I can read from the screen. So can you provide some strategies regarding number 4 to work through fears or emotional blocks? So I don't know if that question is coming from a clinician or a parent. I'm assuming it's from a clinician, but I'm not sure. We've developed, so first of all, we've used the animal models, and we talk about the fears, the shame, the resentment that may underlie the different blocks that can surface. So sometimes just talking about it is a huge relief and can free the carer to do something different. But we've also developed a couple of measures, and one of them is just in the process of being analyzed for its psychometric properties. And so we ask parents, which of these blocks can you identify with, and which of them can you relate to in terms of perhaps interfering with your recovery efforts? And that is a great starting point for parents to be able to kind of say, oh my God, I didn't realize that because of my brother who was suicidal growing up, I'm terrified every time, I see her feel sad because I'm afraid that the same fate is going to happen, okay? So it's a great way to talk about these different pieces.
And then another way we do that clinicians can do in their offices to support parents, and also we do very much of in the 2-day workshop that we run for parents. So we'll do role plays, and people think, oh my gosh, role play, but it's really great because the whole group gets behind the person. So let's say Adele's going to be a mom, and she's going to do either some recovery coaching or some emotion coaching, right? So we put another mom, let's say, and the mom is playing the daughter, and we put like a bagel and a chocolate milk, and she's going to get her to eat. And then what we do is we get a third parent to come. So you know how we all have kind of voices in our head saying, don't push her too hard. She's going to push her over the edge. She's going to go storming off, and maybe she'll go and have behaviors or whatever, right? We all have that. So we'll actually get another parent to come. And so there's Adele trying to talk to the daughter, trying to say, I know it's hard, but we decided you were going to eat this, and I know you can do it, and I know, right? And here's a voice, don't push her too hard. And the mom actually does the voice as though it's the voice in Adele's head. Do you know how much that gets parents to be able to realize that that fear that's in their head, don't do it, you're going to blow it, you're not going to do it well enough. Yeah, you feel like, how am I? So it raises the awareness of what we're all, and clinicians are the same. We do the same
thing with clinicians.
With clinicians, and we had another clinician from the audience saying, you're going to blow it, you're not going to get it right.
No one's immune.
Yeah, no one is immune. So just that in itself, and can you see, you guys, how we do not take the whole thing lightly, but by lightening it up a little and getting parents to coach each other, we sculpt their bodies, say one is too charging, we say soften a little, and then other parents will do it. They'll coach each other. Another is too like, oh, I'm so scared that this isn't going to work. They'll say sit up straight. We even do voice coaching. Can you believe it? But it's really, it all breaks it down to simple ways of saying, if people get skills that are we all learn to tie our shoes, but you know what? When you don't know how to tie shoes before you do, it looks very complex. But if you break it down to all the steps, everybody can learn it.
We call these advanced caregiving skills, because in the regular world with the other children, these skills were not required. But we all know that eating disorders can bring us all to our knees. It can create a situation where we have to do really, really drastic things and really different things, right? So that's why we call these advanced caregiving skills. Not doing these things did not cause the eating disorder, but we have found that engaging with the loved one in this way can absolutely create new pathways for healing.
And on that note,
okay. Thank you both for being here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you to Joanne Dolhanty, Adele Lafrance Robinson. Sometime, it's been known to happen, we have technical issues here. If for any reason the recording has been compromised, I want to let people know that we are going to send out the recording that we have. We're also going to send out the slides from this webinar. I know that there are a lot of questions that you probably still have. And so if we go back to the title slide, I think it has your website on it.
Oh, right.
So I just want to direct people to Joanne and Adele's website. In case you missed the beginning, they've both written a wonderful bulletin for us, the new NEDIC bulletin. If you would like to subscribe to the bulletin, this one does focus on integrating the two models. There have also been previous bulletins on each separate model. So you can subscribe for $20 for an electronic subscription. It's 5 bulletins a year, very worth it. Just contact us to learn more, and thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully we can get these two back again.
Oh, thanks for
the questions, and just a real honor to have you join in. Really, thank you so much.